Good morning. Come in. I am John Beckmann, Dr. John Beckmann, U.S. Senate GOP primary candidate in the state of Alabama. Vote for me, March 3rd. Hello Sherry. Hello Jim. Hello Paul. Hello Sam. Hello Jessica. Welcome. So today we will talk about genetic diversity. I had no idea what I was going to talk about this morning, but I have been mulling this topic over for a while, and I thought that it felt like a good spot because the last couple arguments and videos I've been making have been talking about genotypes. I talked about genetic predisposition to bad behavior, and I talked about genotype discrimination. So I felt like today would be a good time to talk about genetic diversity and why you want the best argument you have ever heard for genetic diversity. But first, it's the morning, it's Friday, and it's really hard to go in today because we're all tired and we want to be done with the week. So get your coffee in your cup. I like my coffee with ice because it's so hot in Alabama. Make sure it smells good. Let's do a citation to the simultaneous libation of Scott Adams. Cheers. Okay, so let's talk about the best argument you've ever heard for genetic diversity. So what is genetic diversity? Genetic diversity is basically if you have a population, and within that population you have a bunch of different genes. You have a bunch of different genetic alleles. That means each individual person shares something that makes them a little bit different. That's called genetic diversity. And that difference is encoded in the structure of their genes. So the letters that write your biological program, the A's, the T's, the G's, the C's in biology. Genetic diversity means maybe in one spot here you got a T instead of an A. And you're different from your brother or your sister in this one spot because you got a G but they got a C. And you're different from your cousin here in 100 base pairs. And you're different from your neighbor because you got a million base pair differences. So that is called genetic diversity. And genetic diversity encodes different functionalities in different proteins, and it encodes different behaviors, okay? So that is what genetic diversity is. Now, essentially the best argument for why in all situations you want genetic diversity is because diversity is a form that gives you more options, okay? And I'm actually going to explain this in a very, very specific farming example, and once you hear that farming example, you're going to be like, I got it now. So having more options allows you to be able to respond better to stressful situations. If something happens, if there's a shock to the system, if you have a bunch of options to choose from, you can option for the best possible option, okay? And genetic diversity builds in when you have a population of a bunch of different genetic codings. If there's a shock to that system, that allows the system to be more likely to survive because they have many, many, many different options, and some of these options are going to do better or worse in response to that shock. Okay? So the term that actually, the better term here is actually called anti-fragile. This is a book from Nassim Taleb. He kind of defines this and he kind of outlines why genetic diversity makes you anti-fragile. Anti-fragile, he says, means that if you are in a situation that's unpredictable or uncertain, that's actually the environment where you grow. So things that have genetic diversity can actually improve their existence, improve their population, improve the strength and the quality of their robustness in situations that are very, very unpredictable. Okay? So now let me give you the example. This is an example from agriculture and an example from farming. Okay? Imagine you have two cities. One city here and one city here. And imagine this is long, long, long ago. Or well, not long ago, but imagine that they're farming cities. Okay? So these cities produce everything that they need to eat and survive. So one city is owned by a company, okay? And that company manages all the farming in that entire city, okay? It produces all the food, and the corporation that runs that city wants to do it in the most efficient way possible because it wants to produce the most food and it wants to save the most money. So what it does is it takes one strain of corn, which is the best growing strain of corn in that area, and it just grows all corn, okay? So imagine that city that's just growing corn. Now imagine next door you have a city that outlaws corporations. Just imagine this, okay? And so the farming is instead in this other city, run by 100 farmers who are all different, who have all grown up and been taught how to farm by their dad and their grandfather and their great-grandfather. And they've inherited seeds, corn seeds, from their great-grandfather, and their great-grandfathers and their grandfather and their fathers have been breeding and breeding corn for the last 1,000 years. So in this other city, there's 100 different farmers that each have 100 different strains of corn. So in one city, you have complete genetic diversity. And in the other city, you have no genetic diversity. The corporation just plants one version of corn, one strain of corn. Okay, now imagine both these cities are neighbors, and all of a sudden a virus sprinkles down, a corn virus that's going to kill all the corn, okay? A corn virus sprinkles down onto these cities, and it affects the one strain that the corporation is growing. What's going to happen to all that crop? It will all die. All that corn will die, and that entire city will starve to death. What's going to happen in the other city where there is 100 different farmers planting 100 different strains of corn? That virus is going to hit all those different strains, and some of those strains are going to die, but some of those strains are going to be fine because they're different. They have genetic diversity. So in the end, this city, the city with genetic diversity is going to survive, okay? So that is the best example for why you want diversity in systems, is because diversity allows options in response to stressful and chaotic situations. That is the secret power of genetic diversity. So with that, are there any questions? Oh, I should also relate that to this article from Nature. So this relates to public policy, because what happens is in the U.S., all the farmers want to make the most money, right? Many times they option to plant the crops in their region, which is going to make them the most money, okay, the cash crops. Now, this is good for them, but it's not necessarily the best thing for the entire United States. Because then what happens is there's less crop diversity because people are just planting the thing that they can make the most money off of. And then what happens is if there's a shock to the economic system of that particular crop, the U.S. does not respond as well, okay? And the other thing is that this study is saying is that if you actually diversify the different types of crops that you're planting throughout your entire country, if you diversify that, you actually end up producing more food in total, as opposed to less crop and less diversified agricultural systems. That's just a link to a paper that I was reading. So I hope you liked the video. You can follow, you can like, you can share if you do, and you can go to eaglewolfpack.com to see more videos, and you can ask questions or catch me every morning with my videos. Have a good day.